All right, Packers, like I said in the class intro, this is really supposed to help us just review everything we know, but there also is a learning check 7.3 that if you listen to this, you'll be able to get the information that you need on that learning check. So this is just a little bit of cultural literacy, they call it, right? So that book, Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities, never read it. I think a lot of people haven't read it, but the opening line is really famous. Does anybody know what the first line of A Tale of Two Cities is? All right. It says, "It's the best of times, it was the worst of times." And that is really how I look at it, World War II. And I think one of the reasons why it's so popular to study, because we see these incredible acts of bravery and selflessness, big heartedness, but then we also see just disgusting behavior, really. And so it has that sort of best and worst quality. And all kinds of memes as well. They didn't even realize they were going to be memes, but the famous Rosie the Riveter costume, there you got Beyonce giving it a redux. So real quickly, I'm just going to go through the main ideas. If you're listening to this, you'll get the answers to the learning check really easily. So on the first Monday that we looked at this, we did some vocabulary, and it said that all these countries not all, but a lot of these countries in Europe were becoming okay with dictators, having a single person in charge. Here you've got the dictator of Spain, a guy named Franco. Now you could pause, go to the learning check, and that's the first question. Who is this? I just was pointing at the screen, you can't see that. But who is this guy? Franco is his name. He was the dictator of Spain. And what I love about these dictators is that they're image obsessed. They love to look cool. They're those people who take like 45 selfies and then go through and pick the one that looks just right. They are obsessed with how they look. Here's Franco inside in Spain. Most of Spain is not very cold. Got this goofy looking fur coat on, but he wants to look good. So these leaders are all obsessed with how they look. Now, it's fair to say that America's president was obsessed with how he looks, but in a slightly different way. Here's a picture of him. His name, as we talked about, Franklin D. Roosevelt. But he was in a wheelchair for big parts of his adult life, but he kept that a secret. Hard, not impossible, but hard to find pictures, actual photographs of FDR in a wheelchair. So in that way, they're both obsessed with how they appear. Now, this was the question that was hard for a lot of people about what is fascism. So I just want to read it here. This is Hitler's language. "It's not necessary for every individual fighter in this battle, the Nazis' battle, to understand the ideas and the plans of the fascist worldview." Fascism is almost like the religion for Hitler, although he used Christianity as well. "The fascist worldview can exist only if leaders of great intellectual abilities are served by a large group of men who are passionately devoted to the cause. We must inspire discipline and blind faith, for the side with the best disciplined and most blindly observant troops always triumph." So I know that was a lot, but here's what fascism believes. They say regular people can't understand what's important. That's where he says, it's okay if you don't understand what this means, this fascism thing means. Blind faith means you should never question your leaders. Now, the U.S. military, our military, has a strong sense of following orders, but they would not agree with that. They would not say you blindly follow. There are systems in place in the U.S. military where if your leader is giving you bad orders, I'm not going to use another word, you should go and report them, right? And then here's the key as well. Fascists need scapegoats. Now we know almost the minute you talk about Hitler, you know the issue of Jewish people are going to be brought up, right? He picked Jewish people, even though, in fact, as oftentimes people like to point out, he had Jewish family members. He was Jewish by some definitions. But he said the Jewish people are to blame for our problems in Germany. That's called a scapegoat. Unfortunately, we're seeing that here in 2020. People are blaming Asian Americans, some of whom have never even been to China, and discriminating against them, right? So scapegoating is where you pick a group and say it's all your fault. The other assignment that we did on Wednesday was called the home front assignment. You can see that's being cut off a little bit, but I think you'll be able to get the main idea. The three issues, people scored well on the Learning Check 7.2, Executive Order 8802, Executive Order 9906, and the Lend-Lease Act. But here's the part I'm going to ask you about on this Learning Check and maybe on an assessment is, what is this guy's name? Now you can see him. I wouldn't mess with him. A. Philip Randolph was his name. And he called up FDR and he said, FDR, there's a lot of racism in America. We are ready to protest it unless you do something to push racial equality. And so that's where Executive Order 8802 came from. But it was only because, here's the answer, A. Philip Randolph. Only because A. Philip Randolph stood up to the president. Then the other thing to remember is that the reason this statement was false, this one about 40% of you got wrong. The United States government got wrong on assessment, Learning Check 7.2. The United States government refused to help either side in World War II in any way before the attack on Pearl Harbor. This has to be false because we know about the Lend-Lease Act. If you're saying to yourself, I don't know what the Lend-Lease Act is, that's okay. We got time. Let's go to the home front assignment. Okay? And there's the definition there. Again, I want you to have this definition because I want you to use this video as a resource to study and get ready for our assessment. Stick with me here. I'm almost done, but I just, again, want to create this little bucket of information for you to be able to review. We did really well on the review questions, except for this battle, the invasion of Italy. If you missed it, that's okay. There's the page number. Go back to page 779 in the text. Have it read to you. Highlight it. Have it read to you. But the big one with that was Tuskegee Airmen, fighters, African-American fighters, were incredibly heroic in this particular battle. And after that, other fighter pilots requested the Tuskegee Airmen, these African-American pilots who were trained and knew that if they made a mistake, not only would they get in trouble, but they would then bolster the racist claims that African-Americans weren't smart enough to fly a plane or brave enough. So they had incredible pressure, right? We call this representation. And they felt like, and they were being held to a higher standard and felt the pressure of a whole race. So that was the one that was tough. The rest of this stuff I'm going to leave up there. If you don't get it, you can email me, right? But I just want to, Operation Torch, we got that one right in North Africa. Operation Overlord. Oh, I wish we could look at some of these clips together, these brave people. But here's the one that will be on this Learning Check for today. Not just the U.S. was in D-Day, was in the invasion of Normandy, was in Operation Overlord, right? Canadians were there. That's going to be the answer there. Canadians helped the United States, or really didn't help but participated too in this huge battle. Some people think that the opening scene of the movie Saving Private Ryan, it's a little old now, but some people think that's an incredibly accurate portrayal of what it was like. I really like the miniseries Band of Brothers. Now it's violent. I don't know if you would say it's in places school appropriate, but something to look into if you really like this stuff. Band of Brothers, great miniseries. Battle of the Bull, which was kind of Hitler's last chance, failed. And after that, the Allies are really in charge from there moving forward. Great. So there it is in 10 minutes, kind of the main big ideas that I wanted us to get from the last 2 weeks of studying together. And then what we can do is we can use this and all the old assignments on next week's kind of assessments as we try to kind of talk about what we learned and see what we learned. That's all I got for you, but thanks for watching. And now click over to Learning Check 7.3.